Salve, and welcome back to Weekly Roman History, where we take Roman history a little at a time, and brevity is the name of the game. This is part 5, in which we will do away with the monarchy and kick off the next era of Rome, the Republic. The content warnings for this week are ableism, rape, and suicide. The rape and suicide are part of the same story, and it's a really hard one, but it's also important. My sources again this week are the Roman historian Livy and the Greek historian Dionysius of Halicarnassus, who both wrote in the 1st century BCE, 500 years after the events of this story. When we left off in our story, and remember it is more a story than a factual account because we are still in the legendary portion of history, Rome was being ruled by the tyrant Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, who gained power by murdering his stepfather and ruled by fear. Tarquin has rolled back all the proto-democratic features of Roman government, ruling as an autocrat instead of allowing the Senate and the Roman people to vote to ratify his decisions, as our sources say his predecessors did. Tarquin is also third in a line of foreign kings, which began with his Etruscan father or grandfather, depending on the source. His Etruscan ancestry will become an important component to this story. To start with, I'm going to focus on a Roman named Lucius Junius Brutus. This Brutus is not to be confused with Marcus Junius Brutus, who helps kill Caesar several centuries later, the et tu Brute guy, though they have similar roles in history, and much is made of their family connection. Lucius Junius Brutus's grandfather and father were famous and wealthy Roman senators, and Tarquin had them killed when Brutus was young in order to take their wealth. Brutus knows that the king will kill him too if he sees him as a threat, so he pretends to be a fool. In modern terminology, he pretends to have an intellectual disability. In fact, his name, Brutus, means dumb. Tarquin finds his pretend disability funny, and raises him alongside his own sons so that his sons can make fun of him. This is an extremely sad reality of the ancient world. We have numerous instances, even in more factual eras of history, of people with both physical and intellectual disabilities being kept around to be made fun of. Though in this case the disability is faked, which is its own problematic can of worms. We should be aware of this very crappy thing that happened to a lot of real people who deserved better. In any case, Brutus grows up alongside Tarquin's sons, waiting for the right time to abandon his ruse and bring about the Tarquin's downfall. At one point, a plague breaks out in Rome, and the Italian oracles come up empty, so Tarquin sends his sons Aruns and Titus to the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, the most respected oracle in the ancient world. The Tarquin sons bring Brutus along with him. After the Tarquins finish asking the oracle what they need to about the plague, they ask which of them will become king of Rome next, always an important question for the sons of royalty. The oracle answers that the first of them to kiss his mother will next gain sovereignty of Rome. The two sons spend the trip home arguing over which one will kiss mom first when they get back, but Brutus has another interpretation. As soon as they land back in Rome, Brutus pretends to fall on his face and kisses the ground, the soil of his motherland. Soon, Tarquin is at war with the Rutuli, the same tribe Aeneas fought in his legend. It's a war that involves a lot of sieging and waiting, so the officers have a lot of time on their hands. Among these officers are Tarquin's son, Sextus Tarquinius, and a cousin named Tarquinius Collatinus. These aristocratic officers are drinking one night and talking, and as you do, they start to argue over whose wife is the best. Each man is arguing in favor of his own wife, when they decide they might as well go see. What better measure of a woman than what she's doing when her husband comes in unexpectedly? They ride to Rome and walk in unannounced to each man's house and find their wives drinking, playing games, hanging with friends, exactly what their husbands were doing. But Collatinus's wife, Lucretia, is sitting with her slaves and spinning wool. This is like the prototypical act of the good Roman wife, making clothing for her family. It's an immense double standard that these men are not judged for enjoying leisure time while their wives are, but of course this is a time of double standards. So it's obvious, Collatinus wins the best wife contest, and Sextus Tarquinius, son of the king, decides he needs to destroy the pure Lucretia. Sextus returns to the house of Collatinus a while later without all those other men. Lucretia receives him warmly. This is a relative of her husband and the son of the king, so hospitality demands that he be given dinner and a room to sleep in. But in the middle of the night, Sextus sneaks into Lucretia's room with a sword and rapes her. The next morning, Lucretia sends for her husband and her father, telling them each to bring someone they trust with them to witness her testimony of a dreadful deed. Collatinus brings Brutus. Lucretia announces the rape to them and asks them to swear that Sextus Tarquinius will pay the penalty for what he has done. Then she takes out a knife. In her own thought, which reflects Roman belief at the time, she has been polluted by the rape and is no longer a chaste wife. It's a horrific, victim-blaming way to think, and is unfortunately common throughout history, even though it is wrong, wrong, wrong. In Livy, the men present try to talk her out of it, telling her that only Sextus has committed a crime, and Lucretia has done nothing wrong. Which is true, and a perfect example of the fact that Romans were capable of knowing right from wrong, even when their culture steered them otherwise. But before anyone can stop her, Lucretia plunges the knife into her own heart and dies. Brutus takes the knife from her chest, and on the blood-stained blade, he makes an oath that takes their promise to Lucretia a step further. Not only will Brutus avenge her by punishing Sextus Tarquinius, but he will expel the king who allowed his son to become so lawless, and make sure Rome is never again ruled by a king. The rest of the men, most notably Lucretia's husband Collatinus and her father Lucretius, swear the oath with him. Since Tarquin is outside the city at war, it's a simple thing to guard the gates and gather the people to do what must be done next. The next steps are carefully done in order to be legal. Brutus has the right to call a public assembly because he is an officer among the Celeres, the king's bodyguards, possibly named after Celer, who may or may not have killed Remus on behalf of Romulus. Brutus then enumerates the king's crimes to the people, and shows them Lucretia's bloody body to illustrate the latest outrage. The people vote to exile Tarquin and his whole family. They then vote to give power to 2 men at once with a 1-year term limit, so that no one can become an autocratic tyrant like Tarquin did. The Romans kind of invented the whole checks and balances thing that the US Constitution uses, which I'll go into in a future video. The fact that all this is done by votes of the people, and carefully legally, is another way to distance themselves from the tyranny of Tarquin. Brutus is sure to give the people the voice that Tarquin took away from them. The new 2-at-a-time rulers are called consuls, and Brutus and Collatinus are elected Rome's first consuls. The year is 509 BC, which we mark as the official end of the Roman monarchy and the start of the Republic. Tarquin gets word of the rebellion, and after failing to win over the Latins, takes refuge in his ancestral home of Etruria. If we take the theory presented in the last video, that the Etruscan kings actually represent a conquest of Rome by Etruria, we can see this as Tarquin, the colonial governor, going back to the motherland for further instruction. When negotiations by ambassadors fail to restore him to his throne, Tarquin prepares for war. Meanwhile in Rome, they expose a conspiracy of aristocrats attempting to kill the consuls and reinstate King Tarquin. Among the conspirators are the sons of Brutus, and Brutus doesn't even flinch. He has his sons executed. In the process, Collatinus comes under suspicion. He seems a little too lenient on the conspirators, and he is a relative of Tarquin. His name is even Tarquinius Collatinus. So even though everyone seems pretty apologetic about the whole thing, since it was his wife's death that kicked off the revolution and all, the Romans exile Collatinus. It's not you, it's me. The Romans also confiscate all the property Tarquin and his family left behind and distribute it to the people. The grain which Tarquin was growing on the Campus Martius they see as unfit for consumption because he had seized sacred land to grow it, so they toss that in the Tiber River. It's so much grain that the silt piles up on it until it forms the famous boat-shaped Tiber Island, which in Roman times held a temple to Aesculapius, the god of healing, and today holds one of modern Rome's oldest hospitals. This origin story for the Tiber Island is pretty much impossible, but there it is. In another version of the story, the Romans toss the body of Tarquin into the river, and that's what the silt gathers around to create the island, which is even more impossible, and messes up the rest of the story because in the canonical versions, the Romans never kill Tarquin. Spoiler alert. Tarquin first succeeds in getting the Etruscan cities of Veii and Tarquinii to wage war on Rome with him. In that war, Tarquin's son Auruns faces off in single combat against the consul Brutus, and they come to a draw by killing each other. It's a huge bloody battle, so many people dead that neither side thinks they can fight anymore, and no one can tell who won. Then in the night, a godly voice emanates from the forest and says that Rome won because they lost 1 fewer soldier than the Etruscans. That's good enough for everyone. Veii and Tarquinii abandon Tarquin, and Rome goes home to celebrate a triumph, which seems like an exaggeration, and a funeral for their liberator Brutus. Tarquin next goes to the Etruscan city of Clusium, which is bigger and more powerful than his earlier allies, and convinces its king, Lars Porsena, to declare war on Rome. Since Porsena and the Clusians are approaching from the north, they'll have to cross the Tiber to get to Rome, and there's still only one bridge, the Pons Sublicius, made entirely of wood with no metal fastenings. The Roman army goes to work demolishing the bridge, so the enemy won't have easy passage, but the enemy is approaching fast, so 3 Roman soldiers stand at the other end of the bridge, fighting off enemies at the bottleneck so that none can cross. 2 of the Romans eventually run across to safety, but 1 stays, vowing that not a single enemy will get past him. This is Horatius Cocles. Cocles means one-eyed, which he apparently was, and Horatius as in a descendant of one of the triplets from the battle between the Horatii and the Curiatii. There's something cool and literary about having this Horatius fighting for Rome in a group of 3, then having him be the last one standing, just like his ancestor. Except Horatius Cocles is fighting an army instead of 3 people, and he has to hold his ground instead of using strategic retreats. He does hold the enemy off until the bridge collapses. Then he jumps into the Tiber and swims across in his full armor, an amazing feat, especially because he is heavily wounded. For his heroism, he is given as much land as he can plow in one day. The tradition of giving land in exchange for good military service is an important one in Roman culture. Horatius Cocles becomes the first hero of the war with Lars Porsena. I usually call him Bridge Guy. We'll talk about 2 more heroes in this video. Thanks to bridge guy Horatius Cocles, Porsena fails to take the city by force and has to settle in to besiege it. A siege is a long and costly process for both sides, and things get pretty bad in Rome without supplies. A nobleman named Gaius Mucius comes to the Senate and asks permission to sneak into the enemy camp and kill Lars Porsena. The Senate thinks that sounds pretty crazy, but they're like, sure, try it. Mucius sneaks through the camp in the dead of night, looking for Porsena, but there's a problem. He doesn't know what he looks like. There's no photography, no newspapers or internet. People don't know what foreign kings look like. A lot of people might not know what their own king looks like if his dominion is big enough. So Mucius looks for signs of power, which is easy because remember, the Romans took their royal insignia from the Etruscans. He sees a guy sitting on a curule chair, dressed in purple, handing out orders to the soldiers, and figures this is the guy. So Mucius takes out his dagger and kills the king's secretary. Guards take him down immediately and bring him to the real Lars Porsena. Porsena demands information from him and threatens to torture him with fire. Mucius scoffs and puts his right hand into the fire that is lighting Porsena's tent. He burns off his right hand without flinching. I like to imagine just making direct eye contact with Porsena. He says, "This is how much a Roman fears pain. I would never give up information under torture, but I'll give you this. I am only the first of a conspiracy of 300 men just like me, determined to kill you. We're trying it one by one. I assumed I'd probably fail and die, but do you think you can last against the 299 that are coming after me?" This freaks Porsena right out. It's a lie, of course. Mucius was the only one, but it works. Porsena is convinced there's an army of assassins ready to kill him, and he sends ambassadors to Rome to ask for peace. He sends Mucius back home, where he is given the nickname Scaevola, Lefty, because he burned off his right hand. Mucius Scaevola is the second hero of the war with Porsena, and he too gets some land to farm, which become known as the Mucian Meadows. So after Mucius Scaevola single-handedly wins the war, see what I did there, Porsena takes some more hostages. Sidebar on hostages. Hostage-giving was a common facet of ancient warfare. When you think of hostage, you think of someone taken by force and held under threat of death to extract demands, and that's not exactly what I mean. In ancient treaties, it was common for one or both sides to voluntarily surrender some of their own people as hostages to guarantee their fidelity to the treaty. Usually the hostages would be parts of important families, kings' children and such, so that the leaders are motivated to keep their word. The hostages would be treated as guests and live among the foreign state, perhaps for many years, with both sides understanding that if the other side breaks the treaty, these hostages will be executed. So to guarantee everyone keeps things honest while they hammer out the details of the peace treaty, Porsena receives as hostages 20 youths from the noblest Roman families, 10 boys and 10 girls. But while they're still bargaining and Porsena is camped on the Janiculum hill across the Tiber, one of the female hostages, Cloelia, convinces the rest of the girls to escape with her. They escape by swimming across the Tiber, which, as I've established, is really hard to do, and reunite with their families. Their families, being good noble Romans, send them all back to Porsena, rather than risk breaching the peace. Porsena is impressed by Cloelia's bravery, and tells her he'll release half the hostages, whichever she chooses. Rather than saving herself and the other girls who escaped with her, Cloelia chooses to free the boys, so that if the Romans have to go back to war with Porsena, they'll be able to fight. On the sexism scale, I give this story a 6 out of 10. It's not as horrific as most of the stories about Roman women and girls, in that Cloelia has agency and is genuinely courageous, but it's still a little icky, because she values herself less than the young men based on gender. In any case, the Romans put up a statue of Cloelia in the Forum, and because it's a higher honor to have the statue riding a horse, Cloelia's statue is on horseback. Eventually, the Romans and Porsena are on good enough terms that Porsena winds up sending back all the remaining hostages too, so Cloelia's story ends well. Cloelia is the third and final hero of the war with Lars Porsena. Here comes our primary source quote, Bona Porsenae. According to Livy, during his own time, centuries later, it was customary when selling the property of a defeated enemy to call them the bona Porsenae, or the goods of Porsena. Livy points out that this is kinda inconsistent, since Porsena left on good terms and therefore didn't have his property sold to the Romans. But apparently, when auctioning off the spoils of war, the Romans used the phrase bona Porsenae as a reference to the first major enemy of the Republic. After Porsena ditches him, it's over for Tarquin. He makes some more attempts to retake Rome with other allies. The last one is the Battle of Lake Regillus around 496 BCE, in which an elderly Tarquin fights Rome alongside the Latin League, and the legendary demigod twins Castor and Pollux fight on behalf of the Romans. This attempt fails too, and Tarquin eventually dies powerless and obscure in exile. The vow Brutus made over Lucretia's body in 509 BC holds true for the next 500 years. Rome is no longer a monarchy ruled by a king, but a republic ruled by the Senate, the people, and 2 consuls at a time. That's not to say the government stays the same for those 5 centuries. The republic is a time of frequent change and upheaval, as different groups and individuals vie for power, until it finally falls and is replaced by a monarchy by another name under the Emperor Augustus in 27 BCE. In our next video, we'll explore the republic system of government and some of its early important figures, before resuming the narrative of Roman history. See you next time!